So yeah, I'm from Stylus. If you don't know Stylus, we are an innovations advisory with 500 plus global clients who we deliver actionable business insight to across industries from retail to fashion, food and beverage, and I look at media and marketing. So I'm going to talk to you about the state of media, and I want to start with this quote. An entertainment and media offering today simply cannot thrive without the economic, social, and emotional power of fans. I think this is a timely reminder of the fact that anyone who creates content, and I think that's probably most brands now, needs to continually ask themselves whether they are putting the fans first. And I've no doubt that putting your consumer, your customer first will be high on your agenda and your brands and clients' agendas. But I wonder whether your current idea of what a fan is somewhat different from the reality. Now, over the past 5 years, technology has completely transformed what it means to be a fan, and more broadly, a consumer. And it's the younger generation of millennials and Gen Z who are now really driving some fundamental behavioral shifts that are completely changing the landscape for brands of all stripes. Now, firstly, I'm going to spend some time talking about today's media consumers and their new behaviors. Then I'm going to talk about some of the companies that I think are successfully tapping into these behaviors. And finally, I'm going to look at how these core consumer behaviors could influence media in the future. Oh, sorry. So let's begin by getting under the skin of these new media consumers so that you've got a real sense of what drives them to engage with and share content. And the key behaviors that you need to understand are the need for self-validation, a desire to express identity, and desire for interactivity. So let's start with this idea of self-validation. At Stylus, we talk about the younger generation being a post-diversity generation, and what we mean by that is that they celebrate difference and don't consider diversity or demographic labels to be necessary or helpful. For them, diversity is a given. There is no normal for them. They therefore look to find self-validation from their own unique individuality. And because technology has enabled them to have near limitless information at their fingertips, they're constantly seeking new experiences and perspectives in order to self-optimize. Now, all of these things contribute to their sense of identity. So self-validation for this audience is about exploring and embracing diverse perspectives, cultivating personal passions, and pursuing self-optimization. And this manifests itself in the different ways they want to consume content. And because of this, we're seeing the rise in popularity of certain aspects of social media. The desire for diverse perspectives, for example, is fueling the rise of streaming platforms like House Party here, where you can create a live-streamed hangout for groups of people. And the emphasis on personal passions is changing the way that people discover content. Spotify, for example, has adapted to this shift by taking its whole strategy towards pushing consumers to music through mood. For many people, Spotify is intimidating at first glance. It's impossible to discover new music as there's just too much content there. So they've pushed the playlist as the delivery mechanism, particularly those created for specific moods, desires, and actions. You can see some here. Playlists for when life sucks, or when you're feeling young, wild, and free, which is one of my favorites, obviously. It's a reflection of this individualistic desire for people to curate their own personal identity through their online and offline perspectives. And when it comes to self-optimization, YouTube is the destination of choice. 86% of viewers say they regularly turn to YouTube to learn something new. And recent research revealed that how-to videos earn the most attention of any content category on YouTube, even more than music clips or gaming. Now, the second layer of this generation's makeup is the desire to take this identity they've created and express it online in order to enhance their personal brand and therefore reinforce that sense of identity. This need to express and share identity is the core driver behind the success of the big social networks, of course, and it's the reason why the average internet user now has about 8 social accounts, and 1 in every 3 minutes spent online is devoted to social networking and messaging. As a result, It's the reason why in the past 18 months we've seen so many media brands heading to these social channels and trying to join the digital discourse. ESPN and NBC are on Snapchat, the NBA is coming to Twitch, Bloomberg has just launched a 24/7 rolling news network on Twitter. But what these media brands are learning is that just going where the audience is not enough. This is Tenor, which is a search engine for GIFs. So obviously these bite-sized videos are seen as a bit silly and throwaway, but they've become one of the main tools for social media communication. In fact, research by Tenor revealed that over a third of millennials who use visual tools like GIFs say that they communicate their thoughts and feelings better than words do. So with Tenor, you can plug in an emotion or mood and get a bunch of GIFs to share to reflect how you feel. And they're entertaining in their own right, clearly, but what makes them a successful tool is their ability to express identity. And that's what makes them shareable. And what makes content successful on social media is its shareability. Now, the third element that's key to this generation's media behavior is their desire for interactivity. This is not a lean-back audience. Gamers and their spectators are the biggest entertainment community in the world. 665 million people watch gaming video content globally. That's bigger than the audiences of HBO, Netflix, ESPN, and Hulu. And this group is made up of predominantly Gen Z and millennial consumers. Now, as a result, these fans have grown up with a media experience that is completely immersive and interactive. And so this is what they want all media to be like. With this desire for interactivity in mind, HBO recently launched a TV show, Mosaic, which is also an app. And on the app, you have a number of different versions you can explore, as well as the linear version on TV. So it's a great example of creating content to appeal to both traditional and newer consumption behaviors. And I think this marks the shape of things to come, giving the consumer control. And I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Now, the third element that's key to this generation's, there we go, is that, sorry, hold on. So the audience we're trying to engage with is looking for these three things: self-validation, expressing identity, and ideally they want to do that in an interactive way. So now let's turn to who is succeeding at this. And I want to take you through a quick tour of the success stories before looking at what the future holds. And the stories that I'm going to look at are Vice, BuzzFeed, and Live.me. Now, Vice has made its name creating content that speaks to millennial and Gen Z desire for individuality and self-expression. And when Schweppes wanted to promote a new drink called Alt, they turned to Vice to create a video series called Self-Portraits, showcasing people who succeeded in their field without compromising their individuality. Now, I think what's interesting about this example from Vice is that it shows how anyone creating content today, whether they're a media brand or in this case a soft drink brand, should be paying attention to these behaviors. The first video documented the career of Sinead Collins, who's an Australian woman who succeeded in the male-dominated world of skateboarding. And the Alt brand wanted to celebrate her because she's made it to the top not by doing what everyone else is doing, but by being herself. And this video has racked up over 230,000 views since it was released in December. Now, what I like about this campaign is that it shows Schweppes understand how important it is to be producing content that can compete with what you might see on Netflix or HBO. They're not competing with a competitor's advertising, they're competing with the entertainment that's monopolizing millennial attention: social media, gaming, YouTube. But more than that, they understand that this content has to be more than just entertaining. It has to speak to these desires for self-validation, self-empowerment, self-expression. After all, the tagline for this campaign is "Keep Doing You." Now, BuzzFeed, as I'm sure you're aware, are masters at creating content that works as a badge of online identity. They've long pursued a strategy of tapping into age-based and geographical touchpoints, like this one. If you weren't a 90s kid, you've got no chance of naming these 10 snacks. But they also build content around key millennial and Gen Z passions and personal identities. Their first experiment tapping into this was Tasty. And Tasty is a recipe website. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's simple, it's easy, it taps into the millennial and Gen Z desire for instant skills and self-optimization. But it's also providing tools for people to express identity, speaking to food preferences, but also the way that people self-identify as vegans or paleos. And according to BuzzFeed, and I think this is a really interesting data point, millennials with fluid or fringe identities were once just 20% of the media audience, but now they account for 80%. So tapping into these identities is now a huge commercial opportunity. Tasty is now more successful than its parent company. It reached 1 billion views in April last year and has branched out into selling cookbooks and a hugely popular hot plate. But the key to its success is that people are sharing these videos, as much for what they say about the sharer as for the recipes themselves. Because Tasty has been so popular, BuzzFeed has now launched a host of new sub-brands based on popular passions and hobbies. Playful, for example, is a partnership with Universal, targeted at millennial parents, a demographic that's incredibly savvy and specific in their needs, and are actively looking for online tips and guidance. Now, these are all great examples of how BuzzFeed is tapping into the desire for self-improvement and optimization of this generation, and packaging the content up so that it can be used as a tool for self-expression. Now, I want to quickly look at a legacy brand here, BMW, because they're a great example of a non-media brand that's clearly learning lessons from the likes of BuzzFeed, particularly in relation to how they use content to nurture loyal customers and build a sense of community around their brand. So this is the old BMW website, product, front and center, and a functional approach based around the kind of car that you might want. And this is the new one launched in November. You can see they've taken a deliberately BuzzFeed-style approach. The new website is built around magazine-like lifestyle features with a focus on the passions and desires of established and potential BMW customers. So it takes its direction from the customer. The content is guided by search terms that are plugged into Google by visitors to the website. I think the lesson here is that any brand should be now asking themselves, what kind of personal passions is our content tapping into? How can that content speak to identity and be used as a vehicle for personal expression by the audience? My last success story is Live.me, which is a live streaming platform from China that's hoping to take live streaming mainstream in the West. As you can see from the screenshots, Live.me is a bit insane. You use it to create what are essentially video selfies. They're live stream broadcasts about you and your amazing life. People then watch and send you virtual gifts, which you can then pay for by accruing coins via games like the coin giveaway you can see in the middle image, or by purchasing them with real-world cash. Now, it's that last bit that has helped make live streaming in China a $5 billion industry. Hundreds of platforms enable millions of consumer performers like this guy to engage fans directly, and a lot of money gets spent on virtual Christmas trees. Now, such has been its success that Beijing firm ByteDance just invested $50 million in the company. And with their backing, LiveMe was able to open a 4,000 square foot production base in LA in October that will be used to fast-track LiveMe's original content strategy. And it will also bring live streamers like this guy, Ryan Carter, together with media, brands, and influencers. So what makes LiveMe's offering so enticing to consumers, investors, and brands? Well, it goes back to playing to those consumer behaviors. The offer taps into all three of the themes I've been talking about. It offers tools for self-expression, alongside the self-validation that comes with being able to accept virtual gifts and make money from your personal brand. And it's all wrapped up in an incredibly interactive package. Now, we've yet to see this phenomenon take off quite in the same way in the West, but it's likely to be a key trend in the next couple of years. Now, Vice, BuzzFeed, and Live.me are all fairly new brands born in the digital age, so I just want to finish this section by looking at a legacy media brand that's learning these lessons too. The New York Times tagline has always been, all the news that's fit to print. So remember when I talked about self-validation, I mentioned that this generation is one for which there is no normal. You can immediately see how a one-size-fits-all approach just isn't going to work, which is one of the main reasons why it seems ridiculous for modern consumers to buy a newspaper that claims to have everything in it you could possibly need. Well, the New York Times knows this, and it's very serious about innovating itself out of the dire situation that many traditional news publishers are finding themselves in. Like Netflix, it's trying hard to refocus the whole business around subscriptions. And this means a focus on its most valuable readers, rather than trying to boost page views from casual browsers. Like BuzzFeed, it's trying to create content that speaks to identity, self-optimization, and self-expression. For example, it created the Race-Related newsletter that features essays on race and ethnicity in America, a subject millennials and Gen Z want to discuss in new and more provocative ways. And the New York Times sees that it can play a role in serving that specific need. And like Live.me, it's trying to be more interactive. The New York Times VR app has been downloaded more than 1 million times, and the company has produced 16 original VR films so far. And they can be viewed via this New York Times branded cardboard VR headset. All of these things add up. Add all these things up together, and you can see why the New York Times is calling 2018 the year of the audience. So what does the future hold? How are these three core consumer behaviors going to influence media and brand content in the years to come, and how can you get ahead of the curve? Well, there are 4 exciting areas I think we should be keeping our eyes on, and they are artificial intelligence, the influence of gaming, augmented and mixed reality, and blockchain technology. Now, smart assistants, and we've heard a lot of this today, are going to finesse the kind of content discovery systems we heard about earlier in relation to Spotify and Netflix. At some point, it's going to become the norm for people to search for content via tools like Alexa. Initially, we might make a request by asking for an action movie, but perhaps future consumers will go one step further. Rather than asking for a particular genre, they'll ask for content based on mood, exciting, sad, uplifting, and so on. One potential impact may be that emotion and mood become more important than genre when planning content. Now, here's an early example of what this might look like. This is a movie discovery website called Film. Genres are out, feelings are in, is its tagline. And it recommends films based on emotion-driven categories. I feel like discovering a paradise. I feel like getting the band back together. I feel like getting some smarts. Now, that last one will show you thought-provoking techie films like The Social Network and Steve Jobs. So you can see how this is tapping into that same idea of self-optimization, self-definition of things like tasty. It's saying, I want my movie choice to serve me in a way that's more than just about entertainment. Now, you could say this has always been a motivation for consumers, but I think it's becoming much more explicit now as technology like AI enables recommendation and discovery to be much more nuanced and reflective of personality. Now, I talked earlier about the influence of gaming on consumer desire for interactivity, but game viewing behaviors are also impacting the way audiences want to view media content. NBC has started using a drone camera, the Skycam, to offer viewers a lengthwise view of football matches. It's been called the Madden Cam, as it mimics the view gamers see when playing the popular Madden series of football games. I'm going to skip because I think I'm running out of time. I'm getting the thumbs up for that. So the return of appointment viewing is another example. So what I mean by that is content that the audience watches together at a specific time. Some of you may have seen HQ Trivia, which is tapping into this. It's taken the US and UK by storm. You log on at a regular time every day to answer 12 questions and play against thousands of other players all watching the live stream at the same time. I clearly am running out of time, so I'm going to have to skip a few things, unfortunately, but come and talk to me afterwards if you want to hear more. I will leave you with what I think are the key learnings that we should take away from the current state of media. So, firstly, create for the self-validating consumer. So the new media consumer is part of a post-genre, post-labels, no normal generation. So as such, I think there's a really exciting opportunity here to build content around fringe identities, niche passions, and more diverse perspectives. Secondly, offer tools for expression. So rather than creating content that is just there to be passively consumed, you need to be offering consumers tools that they can use to express identity. And thirdly, find new routes to interactivity. Interactivity is a given, but the thing that scares people off is the idea that you have to have expensive technology behind it. And I think, as I mentioned just there at the end with HQ Trivia, you can create simple interactive experiences that actually spark new behaviors, like appointment viewing. So thank you very much. I'll leave it there.